Hello, everyone. My name is Kalela Williams, and I am with Mighty Writers, and welcome to this broadcast. I'm so excited to have Eric Smith here with us. I'm going to actually take off my mask because I'm here in the South Philadelphia Library, but I'm in the room by myself, so I'll go ahead and take my mask off. I'm the director of writers. I'm the director of writing with Mighty Writers, and again, I'm really excited to introduce Eric Smith. This event is hosted by Mighty Writers and South Philadelphia Library, where I'm broadcasting from. It is part of a series of events made possible by the CHOP Cares Community Grant, which focuses on promoting mental health and emotional wellness. To that end, we will have a community, we'll have CHOP's Community Health Program Coordinator for Community Health and Literacy and for their community health and literacy center. Sorry, that's a bit of a mouthful. They will be dropping a survey, administering a short survey in the chat. This will be a few brief questions asking about the usage of books for emotional well-being. They won't be collecting any demographic information. There'll be a pre-survey. So they'll drop in a pre-survey right before the program and then a post-survey afterwards. So if you don't mind just taking a minute or two and completing that. So thank you so much. And again, it'll be a short pre-survey and a short post-survey. I will go ahead and introduce Eric Smith, which I'm excited to do. Eric Smith is a young adult author based in Philadelphia, where he's an author of young adult books, I should say. And he will be reading from his novel, Don't Read the Comments, which was a YALSA 2021 Best Fiction for Young Adult Selection, which is a huge honor in the writing world, in the young adult world. And we'll also hear him read a little bit from his newest book, Jagged Little Pill, the novel, which is a collaboration with Alanis Morissette, Diablo Cody, and Glenn Ballard. And it's an adaptation of the Grammy and Tony Award-winning musical. His other recent books include You Can Go Your Own Way, the acclaimed anthology Battle of the Bands, co-edited with Lauren Gibaldi, and his book, The Geek's Guide to Dating, was an IndieBound bestseller. He's also the author or editor of Inked, the anthology Welcome Home, and a contemporary fantasy novel, The Girl and the Groove. And he has short stories and essays published in many, many anthologies. And if that's not enough, Eric is also a literary agent with PS Literary, and he'll tell you a little bit about what that is. Those of you who don't know what an agent is, he'll explain that. But we'll go ahead and get started. Eric, if you don't mind, go ahead and give us a little reading, and I'm going to drop that survey into the chat. But if you want to go ahead and start maybe giving us a little reading from Don't Read the Comments, that sounds great.
Yeah, sure. No, I'd be more than happy to. And thanks so much for having me here. This is wonderful. Sorry I can't be with everybody in person, but I will be sending our wonderful organizer a box of about like 3 dozen young adult books that I really like for you to all pick up at Mighty Writers and read whenever you'd like. There are a lot of writers who have inspired me, and whenever I do events like this, I like to give away piles of books. So yeah, I hope you like all of them.
Yeah, I'd be very excited about that. Thank you.
No problem. So Don't Read the Comments came out back in 2020, in early 2020, and was inspired heavily by a thing called Gamergate, which was it's hard to say was because it's still happening, but it's a bit of a social media campaign against women, people of color, people in the LGBTQ community that was seemingly targeted to video games, but was just largely a big digital hate campaign. And I was really upset watching it happen, getting some splashback myself and watching a lot of friends leave the internet and jobs as a result. And I wanted to write a story about what is it like when you can't be in your safe space anymore, when the place you've contributed to so much no longer wants you there. And that's what Don't Read the Comments is about. Even though there's a love story told in the middle of it, because even when I'm tackling heavy subjects, hope is very, very important to me. So yeah, I'm going to read a little blip from this, and then yeah, answer questions, and we'll chat, and maybe read a little Jagged Little Pill. And yeah, thanks for having me here. Um, so I'll read a little bit of chapter one, and then I've sort of self-edited a bit so I can get to a couple of voices in here. So chapter one starts off with Divya's point of view. Mom, we've been over this, I say, sighing as my mother stares at me with her fretful, deep-set eyes. They're dark green, just like mine, and stand out against her soft brown skin. Wrinkle lines trail from the corners like thin tree branches grown over a lifetime of worrying. I wish I could wash away all of her worries, but I only seem to be causing her more lately. I'm just not comfortable with it anymore, my mom counters. I appreciate what you're doing with, your earnings or however that sponsor stuff works, but I can't stand seeing what they're saying about you on the internet. So don't read the comments, I exclaim, reaching out and taking her hands in mine. So I really like to put the titles of my books in the books sometimes. It's like me winking at the camera. How am I supposed to do that? She asks, giving my hands a squeeze. You're my daughter, and they say such awful things. They don't even know you. It breaks my heart. What did I just say? I ask, letting go of her hands, trying to give her my warmest, it's going to be okay smile. If Mom knew how easily I saw through this little dance of ours, the way we pretend that things are okay while everything is falling apart, she'd probably only worry more. Maybe she does know. Maybe that's part of the dance. I avert my gaze from hers and glance down at my watch. It's the latest in smartwatch tech from Samsung, this beautiful little thing that connects to my phone and my computer, controls the streaming box on our television. Hell, if we could afford smart lights in our apartment, it might control those too. A couple social media notifications start lighting up along the edges of the little screen, but it isn't the unread messages or the time that taunt me. It's the date. The end of June is only a few days away, which means the rent is due. How can my mom stand here and talk about me getting rid of my glitch channel when it's bringing in enough revenue to help us cover the rent, to pay for groceries, when the products I'm sent to review are sponsored to wear and then consequently sell, have been keeping us afloat with a little money to walk around with? I'm going to start looking for a second job, Mom says, her tone defeated. Wait, what? I look away from my watch and feel my heartbeat quicken. But if you do that, I can finish these summer classes another time. Maybe next year. No way. I shake my head and suck in air through my gritted teeth. She's worked so hard for this. We've worked so hard for this. You only have a few more classes. I'll do my part. I can deal with it. I want to. Besides, I've got more gadgets I can sell this month. I just don't want you giving up on your dreams so I can keep chasing mine. I'm the parent. What does all this say about me? My mom exhales and I catch her lip quivering just a little. Then she inhales sharply, burying whatever it was that was about to surface. And I almost smile, as weird as that sounds. That's just our way, Take the pain in and just bury it down deep. We're a team. I reach out and I grab her hands again, and she inhales quickly once more. It's in these moments we have together, wrestling with these challenges, that the anger I feel, the rage over this small apartment that's replaced our home, the overdrafts in our bank accounts, all this time I've given up, it's replaced with something else, with how proud I am of her for starting over the way she has. I'm not sure what I did to deserve you, she says. The watch buzzes against my wrist, a pleasant feeling, as a text message flashes across the screen. I feel a pang of wonder and regret over how a display so small can still have a better resolution than the television in our living room. The galaxy waits for no one. Are you ready, Div? Commander Rebecca. I smile at the note from my producer/best friend, then look up at my mom as she makes her way towards the front door of our apartment, tossing a bag over her shoulder. I'll be back around 10 or so, Mom says, already sounding tired. Just be careful, okay? I always am, I promise. As soon as the door closes, I bolt across the living room and into my small bedroom, which is basically just a bed, a tiny dresser, and my workstation. I've kept it simple since my move since my parents have split. The only thing that's far from simple is the gaming rig. How much time do we have? I ask, tilting my head back and forth. About 5 minutes. I see Rebecca rolling her eyes. You could just use a compact like a normal person, I load up the social media feeds on my desktop. My watch is still illuminating with notifications. I decide to leave them unchecked on the actual device and scope them out in the computer instead. So when people are watching us, they can see the watch in action. That should score me some extra goodwill at the sponsors, and maybe it'll make me look like I'm more popular than people think I am. Because that's my life. Plenty of social notifications, but zero texts or missed calls. All right, so I'm going to skip a little bit ahead from Divya's chapter to Erin. And to basically summarize what's happening in chapter 1 there, Divya's mom is wrapping up her graduate degree in library sciences. They're divorced and sort of having a hard time scraping by in Jersey City. And Divya is selling sponsored material that she gets in the mail while running her glitch stream. But I think we know that means Twitch stream. And she's getting ready to jump into the game that they play throughout the entire book. So now in chapter 2, I'll read a little bit of Erin. There are many planets in this universe, but this one is mine. As my small ship bursts through the atmosphere, hurtling towards the planet's surface, the wind roars outside my vessel, the chassis rattling with an intensity that makes me feel as though the cockpit is set to fall to pieces. 2 sights demand my attention. One, the control panel before me, consisting of a small screen tracking my speed and angle of descent, accompanied by a large surface map of what's below. But if the ship shifts to manual controls and I grip the flight stick, my hands firm against the rubber handle, my gaze is drawn to the second sight, illuminating out the cockpit window, filling my eyes with color. The actual planet, undiscovered, new, and mine. The sky glows with bursts of ruby, purple, and blue, paint that's been carelessly spilled over a possibly large canvas. To the right, forests bloom in what looks like autumn colors, although there's no way to know what the seasons are on this planet. A large mountain range interrupts the foliage with light browns and beiges. On my left, a long, bright blue river cuts through the wilderness, swaths of white streaking through the water. I take a deep breath and steady myself for a landing. With a soft blip, I load up the menu on my wristlet, the display beaming a hollow of light, orange on a darkened background. Class 4 planet. Status, uncharted, undiscovered. Life support capability, positive. Detectable resources, timber, water. Would you like to name this planet? Yes or no? My heart races. I've been waiting for this option since I started exploring this galaxy. In a class 4? Awesome. I'm not going to run and gun. I'm going to take my time, do things right. But before I can decide on a name for my new planet, static rings in my ear. A flicker of worry runs through me as I adjust a small earpiece tucked inside. Did someone else land on this planet? Communication from my guild at our headquarters? The static breaks, and the sound comes in clear. The planet, a familiar voice says. Name it Butts. I put my controller down and turn to see my 6-year-old sister, Mira, standing behind me, her hands over her mouth, eyes sparkling, a surefire fit of giggles set to explode. I take my headset off, the music from my exploration meets real-time strategy game, Reclaim the Sun, quickly replaced by the sound of Mira's irrepressible laughter. Mira, come on, I groan. Get out of here. Planet Butts, Mira shouts, her hands leaving her face and quickly coming back up, as though she's trying to hide that she's the one who just screamed butts at the top of her lungs. Resigned, I smile and motion for her to come sit with me. She scurries over and squeals gleefully as I pick her up, then settle her on my lap in front of the computer. It's a massive gaming rig that I've slowly built piece by piece over the years, collecting parts off of eBay and from discarded machines around my neighborhood, the latter much to my parents' disapproval. No parent likes seeing their kid drag home old, beaten-up computers they found in the trash, no matter how often they tell you to experiment and explore and all of that. And even though I have the graphics turned down a bit to keep things running smoothly, it still looks great. Plus, my rig is great for working on games I'm trying to write with my best friend, Ryan, at our part-time job with Manapunk, a local game developer. All right, I think I'll stop there. There's a lot of fun little asides in this book that kind of ring from my own life when it comes to Erin, taking computers home that he found in the garbage. I used to do that all the time as a kid around my parents were in a fairly wealthy neighborhood, even though we weren't. And I'd find computers in the garbage, and I would take them home, and I would take them apart and try to build my own computers. And oh my God, my parents hated that so much because they were just discarded remnants of electronics all over the basement all the time.
That sounds like my brother. He used to do that, and it would drive me crazy. It drove my parents crazy too. He was just always taking things apart. Of course, now he's a coder. He's not a builder, but he's always loved computers. So I just love this book so much. This is such a great book, and it's dual perspectives. Those of you who haven't yet read it, it is from the perspective of Divya and Erin. And I just love both of them. They're so great, such great characters. And I'm going to ask a few questions, and kids who are tuning in, I know we've got a few who've said hello. Welcome. We've got Eliana and Brandon and Maya, who I've worked with before. So, and maybe some others. Feel free to chime in. We've also got some staff. So I'm going to ask some questions, but if anybody has any questions, please chime in the chat, and I will and Eric can answer. So, yeah, my first question that I was really struck by was this idea of when you read and when you're writing, and even when you're reading fiction, it's sort of like building a world or creating a world. When you're writing, you're setting out this world, and when you're reading, you're creating this world in your mind that you see on the page, or that you're reading on the page and you're creating it in your mind. But the characters are also building and creating worlds. Did you find that writing this sort of informed the worlds that Divya and Erin created, that they explored, that they encountered?
So well, I guess what was the question? They were what?
This idea of the heart of the question is this idea of creating worlds. This idea of we've got characters who are creating worlds, and you're a writer, so you're also creating a world. And so how do these two things collide?
Yeah, well, I just love exploring characters who are also creatives. I think it's so interesting. As a kid, I was definitely one of those creatives with junky computers and also trying to write my own fairly terrible stories. And I like seeing how what they create ends up informing the world around them, because I feel like that's what we all do, right? We write stories that end up reflecting the world that we navigate. In the case of Don't Read the Comments, like the story that Aaron is trying to write that's in the video game that he's writing, that he's an intern for at this video game studio. It digs into racism, and it digs into all these social issues in the game, and the people around him are just like, why does it have to be about that? Why can't it just be a game? They're just elves in this fantasy world. But like, creating is inherently a political thing, and for Aaron, it's important to dig into that sort of stuff. And for Divya, creating this. It's not Twitch, this glitch channel, is also a political thing, because people don't want her to be there, So like, creating in the way that she is her way of speaking out against the people that don't want her in those spaces. So Aaron and Divya are sort of fighting against these, against the stuff that the people don't want them in the spaces that they want to be in. So that's what I was trying to do. I hope it worked.
I think it did. I think it did, and that's actually getting me to another question that I wanted to ask. And this is sort of there's a lot in this book that's light. There's a lot of humor. The Planet Butts is hilarious. I was reading this and I was cackling. There's some other moments that are just fun and thrilling. When they're exploring in these worlds, it's so thrilling, and I'm just involved and wrapped up. But then these darker elements are here too. Can you talk about why it was important to you to talk about the harassment that Divya faces, that even goes to her family being harassed? Why was it important that Erin, as you mentioned, that some of his friends see that, oh, this isn't about race. This is it's not about race at all. Like, yeah. That was important to include.
Yeah, and a lot of it is a response to that. Like, when you see the harassment campaigns that are happening online to people who are working on video games, that are working in these digital spaces, the response I would hear all too often from people were just, oh, it's just the internet. Oh, you can just ignore it. It's just the internet. But for some people, the internet isn't just a place you go to once in a while. It's a place where you live a big part of your life, right? Like, it's where you interact with your friends. It's where you interact with your family. It's where your job sometimes is as you get a lot older. And the idea that people think you can just brush it off and say, oh, it's just the internet. It's okay. Go live your life, when your life can sometimes be right there. It's important to talk about that, because it isn't something you can just always shrug off in the way people think you can. So yeah, I wanted to talk about that, and I wanted to one of the really wonderful things about writing these kind of books and also writing for kids is the idea that books can be windows, books can be mirrors. They can reflect what your experience is, but they can also show you what other people are dealing with in this case. And I want to write a story that tells people like, hey, these people that maybe you're going after on the internet with their little avatars are people, like uh have some empathy, and that's something else I was trying to do with the story.
Yeah, and I think that's really important. I think the idea of empathy is really important. I really liked that. I was struck by Aaron as a character because that he the situation where he's in, where he's wanting to chase his own dreams, but then at the same time he's expected to follow a certain path. Do you have any? And in his case, it was a career, but I think many of us as kids, we there are expectations that might be set for us, and then there's expectations that we set for ourselves. Can you talk about that?
Hmm. Of course. And I feel like we're seeing this, and I love it right now. We're seeing this like influx of like Disney and Pixar and Netflix movies where the kids are kind of standing up to the parents and the parents' expectations of them, and like kind of reclaiming their identity. And that's something I was trying to do with Aaron's character in a big way, because his mom doesn't want him to pursue these certain dreams. She has a pretty set plan for him. He's going to do X and Y, and this hobby of his isn't really important when it is something that's wildly important to him. And I think it's a good message for kids to latch onto, the idea that it's you don't always have to make everybody else proud of you and everyone else uh, feel good about your decisions. It's important to be proud of yourself and be proud of what you want to be doing. I in many ways I'm very lucky that my parents don't read my books, because I feel like if they read Don't Read the Comments or any of my other books where the parents don't quite approve of the careers, they might be a little upset. Because it's a little bit of them. They wanted me to be a doctor, and that didn't happen. There's a great book called The Field Guide to the North American Teenager by Ben Filippi. And if any of you see it in your library, read the whole book because it's brilliant. But the dedication of that book, it says, to mom, I would have been a horrible doctor. People died. And I think about that dedication all the time, because that's also my life.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. We're getting some great questions from our audience. One of our volunteers wants to know, did you stream video games for research while you were watching this?
Yeah, Charlie Olson. I think I know who Charlie is. Uh, so yeah, when I was working on the book, this was back in 2017. Oh my god, publishing is so weird. It works in such long spans of time. Yeah, yeah. I ended up streaming a bunch of streamer stuff on YouTube, and I talked to my nephew a lot.
Yeah.
Another another thing that helped lead me to this story is that every time I would go home to visit my family, I had these nephews who were very into Let's Play videos. That's something else I was watching a lot of. And every time I'd come home, like we'd be catching up about movies or TV shows, and they would just rattle off these lists of YouTubers, and I had no idea who any of them were, but they were like celebrities to them, and it set me down a big rabbit hole there. So yeah, definitely watched a lot of those videos.
It's amazing the lengths we go through to research when we're writing. Yeah. So we got a student who's asking, how do you stick to one story?
Ooh, that's a really good question, and I wish I had a really good answer for that, because I kind of don't. Like I will. One of the ways I stick to writing and finishing a book that I'm working on is I write these gigantic synopsises of every book that I write. Typically, a writer, when they write a synopsis for a publisher or an editor or an agent, it's like 2 or 3 pages. For me, when I write them for me, they're usually like 20 pages long, and it explains every tiny little thing that happens in the book. And then I'm able to write the book, because all I'm doing is coloring in this giant document that I've made, right? That details everything for the book. And that's how I stick to that book and stick to that story. But as for like staying on track and only working on one thing at a time, that's like impossible. Like I'm my new book is due in a couple of months, and I'm working on something else right now that I have a fun idea for, and I'm always jumping in and out of Word documents. It's a bit of a problem, but the synopsis definitely helps me with the one book.
Well, we won't tell your editor. Um, and that is, I appreciate Eliana asking that question because it's such a good one as far as sticking to one project. Yeah. So we have another question here from Anushka. Wondering about what you personally think is the most important part of a character when creating them, like their personality development, etc. I just want to say real fast, I love these comments. Y'all are asking some great questions.
No, that is really good. The most important part of the character, maybe for me, it's motivation, for the character and why it is they're doing what they're doing. When I think about motivation, it's the why of the entire story. In the case of Divya, like, why does she keep doing this streaming thing when people treat her so poorly, right? Like, one is because she doesn't think they deserve to treat her so poorly. She thinks she deserves better. And the other is that it's helping her support her family, and she kind of feels like she has to do it, right? And when you think about motivation, it also makes you think about what do they stand to lose if they don't succeed in what it is that they're doing. And those two things, that's what tends to drive every character that I write about. Like, what are they going to lose if they don't succeed? And why are they pushing ahead? Personality and all of that just sort of ends up flowing as almost an afterthought for some in some cases. But I kind of cheat with all of that because I tend to base all of my characters on friends of mine. So they can all tell when the books come out. They all know.
Do you ever get in trouble?
Oh, they all like it.
That's good. Yeah. So we've got a great question from Amaya, one of our mighty students, and she is going back to your point about a story being about one thing instead of multiple societal things. Do you believe that there are topics or things that can just center one issue and simply be that one thing?
Ooh. Like, can a book simply be about like one specific big issue and that's it?
I think that's what it means. Amaya, if you want to clarify, can a book just be about one big issue? You can feel free to, but Eric, in the meantime, just speak to that, and then if Amaya has a follow-up, I'm sure she'll ask.
Yeah, I mean, I think it can. Don't read the comments is like when people ask me what it's about. I'm like, yeah, it's about Gamergate. It's about cyber harassment in video games and all of that. But it's also about a lot more, and that's where I think B stories and C stories come into play when you're writing a novel, right? There's the A story that spreads the entire book, but then there's the B stories and the C stories that pop up and smatter throughout of it. So I would say that the B story, to some extent is the romance that happens in Don't Read the Comments and the relationship and the online relationship. And the C stories have to do with the friends in the story, like Rebecca's story arc and and Ryan's story arc with everything he's dealing with the video game company. So yeah, like it's something can be about one thing, but there tends to be C stories and B stories that flesh it all out because sometimes it's hard to write 80,000 words about just one story and just one theme. You have to explore a little bit more, I think.
Yeah, and Amaya clarified asking about intersectionality in your stories.
Asking about more intersectionality? I don't know.
I'm not sure if she means intersectionality of societal issues, but I think that's certainly there too. This idea of racism, this idea of harassment, this idea of sexism, especially with what Divya deals with. Any of that sort of, as you're writing, did you sort of think about that?
Oh yeah. I mean, that's what is at the core of Don't Read the Comments. But then, like in my other books, like You Can Go Your Own Way, even though it's like a fluffy rom-com, like set at a pinball arcade in a snowstorm, a big chunk of that book is about gentrification and about what does it mean to be a kid who's kind of raising your parent. That can be that's a really hard thing to navigate. Jagged Little Pill while a lot of the book centers around like a big tragedy that happens at a high school like house party, there's all these other little things that are going on throughout the entire story. It's about transracial adoption and what is it like to be a person of color in a white family when you don't discuss racism. There's a lot there. It talks about restorative justice. Yeah, I think you can throw a lot of themes into a book and say a lot of stuff. There just has to be a balance there of making sure you're telling the story too.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's something that we as some of the kids who I work with, especially with writing, we want to really focus in on that issue. We want to talk about this issue, but we also we have a story that we have to push forward. So that's a great reminder. Those of us who are young writers. And I really loved. I'm going to ask another audience question in just a bit, but I really loved that both of these kids, Erin and Divya, are both children of immigrants or children of families with immigrant backgrounds. And I wondered why you made that choice as far as having both of them have that commonality.
Yeah. It has to do with a lot of the people that I surround myself with. Most of my friends are people of color. Most of the people I grew up with my entire life are people of color, with family and friends that were immigrants, that were from other places. And I like to write in ways that reflect the way I grew up and the people who are around me.
Yeah, and I think that's really exciting because another thing that I see sometimes with our young writers is that we tend to write about ourselves, right? We write very closely about ourselves, and it's good to write. It's really good to sort of step outside of that. So just another reminder too.
Oh yeah, no, I agree. I think the big thing there is like when you are writing outside of your life experience, just make sure you do your homework. Like talk to your friends, talk to your colleagues, like whoever it is that you have to get those extra eyes on your work. Like I always tell people, you should write in ways that reflect the world around you. Just make sure it is reflecting the world around you. Like if it's not, then maybe don't dabble in there.
And especially very good advice. Very good advice. So Eliana is asking a very fundamental question. She says, "I like to snack and write. What helps you? I like to snack and write too, and sometimes I just like to snack. But what helps you write, Eric?"
Yeah. Well, in terms of snacks, I eat a lot of sunflower seeds. It's like a problem. And sunflower seeds aren't like a convenient snack, So like I'm in a WeWork space, and every once in a while there'll be like a sunflower seed outside in the hallway, and everyone knows it was me. Everyone knows that I did it. So yeah, sunflower seeds and coffee are like my go-to snacks. What else do I do to get me in the mood to write? I play video games. Video games are a big thing for me. I like to go garden when I need to get out of my head. I'm not good at it. I'm very bad at gardening. But there's something about it that makes me really happy. And then I try to read other books. I read a wild amount of books, and that gets me in the mood to work on my own.
Awesome. I want to hear a little bit about Jagged Little Pill, a little bit more about that. You talked about it. How did this come about? It's inspired by a Broadway show. Like, where is that collaboration, please?
So the collaboration was really interesting. So I'm adopted. I'm a transracial adoptee. I talk about it. Actually, I don't talk about it that much. I talk about it a little bit online sometimes. And I was on Twitter and I was talking about it, and how like some short stories that I have coming out in upcoming anthologies have adoptees in them. And I'm like, oh, I'd really love to write more about adopted kids. I don't do it enough, this and this and this. And an editor who I know saw me tweeting about that, and she emailed me and she's like, hey, I have this project, and the people who own the project want a transracial adoptee to write about this story. Can we hop on the phone? She's like, I can't email you about it. It's a secret. Okay, cool. So I hop on the phone. She tells me that, Alanis Morissette is working on this Jagged Little Pill novel. I screamed a whole bunch. And they Alanis Morissette and Diablo Cody asked to read Don't Read the Comments. And then they picked me to work on the book. I spent, when did the book started in it was way early last year. It's like February last year. And I worked on it all last year in secret. Could only tell a couple of people. It was a very big secret to keep. And yeah, that's kind of how it came about. It's it's a good lesson in being loud about the kind of things you want to be working on and creating.
Mm.
Like I'm very obviously I'm in a different position because I have books out already, and like people in publishing follow me on social media, so like they saw me doing that. But like it doesn't hurt to reach out to people and say like, this is the kind of thing I want to be working on. How can I work on it? Because you never know.
That is amazing. I love this story of you just getting this call, and not it's not like, oh, I knew Alanis Morissette from school or something. I don't know. That's great. That's amazing. Um, yeah, yeah. So I want to go back to this idea of expectations because Amaya has a question about that. Is do you believe that our expectations of ourselves should always come before our parents?
Ooh, that's a hard one. I feel like
Mm.
someone's gonna yell at me somewhere. I mean, I think there's a mix there, right? Because like your parents ideally want what's best for you, and they care about you, and they want you to succeed and do really well. But you're always gonna have your own dreams that you want to chase down. So I think there's some juggling to do there. Like, are your parents like saying like, oh, I really want you to go to college. I really want you to do X and Y. Those are good things to be pushing you for. But are they pushing you at a specific career that you don't really want to follow? Then maybe that's something you nudge away from. It's I don't know. It's really up to you to figure out what it is you want. But to know that your parents want what's best. Yeah. Now I'm thinking about my own kid right now. I'm like, oh
That
God.
was going to be my next question. That was going to be my next question because you're a parent, and I wasn't sure. I You don't have to answer this or not if you don't want to. But is your child old enough to read your work?
Oh no, he's 4.
Okay. Okay. So then my question is, when I mean, you write for teens, you write for young people. When he gets to be old enough to read your work, what do you think you'll be writing about? Assuming that you're still writing for young people, what do
Ooh,
you think some of the issues that his teen generation will face?
that's a wildly good question.
It might be a little bit of a scary question.
Yeah, I don't know. Like because the things that I imagine he'll be writing about are the things I don't want him to be writing or reading about. Like I don't want someone who's in their late 20s and settling down to write a book in the year 2039 to be like, all right, I'm going to write a book about climate change because my parents didn't do anything. Like I don't want them sitting down to write books about like fighting for more rights for people because we still don't have them. Like that sinks. That's a big sunking dread feeling for me because I hope things will be better for him when he's older. So I don't know. I hope he's just writing romantic comedies that are full of silly jokes and not digging into the terrible realities that I hope aren't coming for him.
Yeah. Um, and I always like to, and again, this is something that's maybe a little bit off topic, but I always like to ask people, writers, what do you think about the challenges to books getting into the hands of teenagers? When we're looking at schools across the country, when we're looking at, there's a lot of uproar about what kids are reading. Do you have any opinions about that?
Hmm. Well, I do, and I'm trying to think of how to phrase it. So, like, we see a lot of news about books being challenged, about books being banned right now, and there's a lot of it. It's on social media, it's all over the place, and it's very scary, right? Because like the books that are being challenged are books that challenge people's identities. Like they're not saying this book is terribly violent and that's why kids can't read it. No, they're saying like, oh, this book features LGBTQ people, and I don't want kids to read this. What about the kids that identify in that space or have parents in that space? What are you saying about those children, right? Like, I hate that. It makes me very, very angry. But for every like one news story we're reading about that, there are hundreds of libraries that aren't doing that and are doing really great work, and booksellers that are doing amazing work, and educators that are fighting back in really big ways. I think all of that uproar that you see is like the people that are causing that uproar and making all that noise, they're doing that. So maybe we don't tell these stories. Maybe we don't push these stories, and you can't let them win. And I'm not gonna. So
That's right. I think that's a good reminder that we still have to keep writing. We still have our stories to tell and other stories to tell, and we have to keep, whether they're close to our heart or whether it's close to a friend's heart or something, we have to tell those stories. I'm going to just remind everyone that if you have any questions, please chime in. Please chime in. Please feel free to ask any questions. We've gotten some really good ones, including Eliana, who says you should try roasted sunflower seeds. I'm not sure those are the ones you're eating, but yeah. Yeah, I think it's really important to, as you mentioned, remember that these are a few voices. They happen to be loud voices, but they're not necessarily all the voices that are out there, in fact, or even most of the voices. And I'm sitting here in a library right now that is not listening to those voices. So it's good to see folks who are continuing to write. Other questions. I'm just going to see if there's any other questions, but in the meantime, any advice that you have for kids who want to be writers, who want to write for a living? I mean, you do that, right? Like you write.
Yeah, no, books are my life. Like I write and both work on books for a living. My day job is I'm a literary agent, and I've worked on, oh God, I've worked on everything from Marvel Comics to Star Wars.
Actually, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Do you mind telling us what a literary agent is?
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. So a literary agent, it's our job in the same way an agent for actors or athletes, to work with writers and help them get to where they want to be. So I work with writers on polishing up their books, finding their books home at publishing houses. I help handle all their money. I help sell their books into foreign languages. I help get them TV and movie deals. And then I help them manage their careers. I help them figure out what to write next and to, polish up their future books. And it's a lot of fun. It's a very viable job if it's something that you want to potentially pursue, when you're done with school and college and all of that. And yeah, advice for writing and making it a big part of your life. I feel like this is the advice you probably hear from a lot of people, but like the big one is to just read as much as you can. The thing that reading widely does when it comes to your writing is it helps you figure out what your voice is going to be. Voice is that one thing that I really feel like people can't teach you, because it's your style, and it's the result of reading and reading and reading and writing and writing and writing. So just read as much as you can. I didn't take my writing seriously until I was like 30, and I wish I'd done it. I wish I'd taken it seriously a little bit earlier, because I hadn't rediscovered young adult books until I was 30. That's when I rediscovered them, and that's when I was like, oh, this is what I've been looking for. This is the kind of voice that I'm good at writing in. And that was it. That's what unlocked it. But if I had kept reading and reading and reading when I was in my 20s, maybe it would have been different. Maybe I would have written earlier. So yeah, read a whole lot. Read a whole lot.
I think that is great advice. And it's something that, sure, maybe people have heard before, but it's definitely worth a reminder to that discovering your voice and reading a lot to inform your voice is so important. So Eliana has one more question, and that is, do you have a best story moment?
Ooh, a best story moment from like my own books, or like from working on books and stuff?
Yeah, let's start with that. Yeah.
So maybe one of my favorite moments in recent memory, aside from like the Alanis Morissette thing. So when Don't Read the Comments came out, I randomly started seeing all this buzz on Twitter, all these people on Twitter, because this girl named Matri had read it. And if you've seen the TV show Never Have I Ever, Matri is the main character on the show, the main girl. So she had read Don't Read the Comments and tweeted about it. And I ended up getting to have a phone call with her and to talk about like why she liked it so much and to discuss what she could potentially maybe do with the book one day. And it was just this wild intersection of very small world things, because it turned out that the woman who plays her cousin on Never Have I Ever did the audiobook for Don't Read the Comments. So I have this like Netflix cast very invested in my novel. and now the character who did the audiobook is way too famous to do an audiobook again. Um, but it was a really cool moment where I could like finally take my book and explain it to my parents and be like, look, there's real things here. I don't have to get my PhD now. Like this is
That's great.
that was a really fun moment. And now yeah, now I watch that show. I see her on TV. We follow each other on social media, and it's wild to have like a celebrity who likes my writing.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. So, again, this is a program that's hosted by Mighty Writers in South Philadelphia Libraries, but South Philadelphia Library. But it's part of a series of events that's made possible by the CHOP Cares Community Grant, which focuses on promoting mental health and emotional wellness. And I have included a post survey here in the chat. So those of you who are tuning in, if you don't mind taking a look at that, and if you didn't do the pre-survey, it's if you scroll up to the beginning of the chat, it's there. And I want to ask a last question, Eric, and that is, can you talk about the importance of mental, emotional well-being? How has that factored into your life, your characters' lives? Just anything that you have to say about that.
Oh goodness, there's a couple of ways. So there's this writer who I like a lot named Erin Bowman who writes just astonishing YA novels. Everyone, go to your library, pick up an Erin Bowman book. She's brilliant. And one bit of advice she gives fairly often about writing is that, when you're writing sci-fi, fantasy, contemporary fiction, etc., you should mine your life. And when you mine your life, you're pulling from your life experience. You're pulling from all that stuff. And oftentimes when you mine your life, you end up digging up stuff that hurts a lot. You end up digging up trauma. You end up digging up past memories that you don't want to talk about. And that can be really difficult. That can be really scary. And it's just so important to have a good supportive community around you, whether it's your friends, whether it's your family, whether it's a therapist or a teacher, to make sure you're unpacking those in a very healthy way. Because like, as much as I might joke with my therapist where I say something like, oh, we don't have to talk about that, I'm going to put that in my next book. That's actually not healthy. It's actually not healthy to only write about it and not get it out in a way that's productive. So talk to people, make sure you get all that stuff out, because letting it sit in there and then saying like, oh, I'm just going to put it in a book, that's not the best way to go about unloading all of that. And then I guess the other mental health thing that's really, like, my wife is a social worker. And I feel like she's helped me unpack a lot of stuff. And sometimes I call her out on it. I'm like, you're social working me right now. Don't do that. But it's very good for me because I am that person that will just put all that stuff in a book and say like, oh, I dealt with it, it's in the book. But that's not healthy. So writing is good. Writing can be very cathartic. Writing can get all those emotions out. But it's important to think back about why you felt all those things in the first place, and how you can heal from all of that stuff.
Yeah, indeed, because sometimes writing can bring these things up, like even if it's something especially that you don't think about very much, and then you're writing and you're like, oh, that. Well, I want to thank you so much, Eric, for today. Thank you so much.
Anytime. And like I said, I got that big box of books that I'm going to come drop off, and I hope all of you enjoy them. There's a bunch of my favorite writers in there, and hopefully they'll inspire you to work on your own stories.
We are so excited about that. Thank you so much. We've got so many kids who will love the books that you have to donate. So we are so appreciative. And those of you who have asked questions today, please expect me to contact you. I was going to say comment, but contact you about a signed copy of Don't Read the Comments. So I want to just thank everybody here, our mighty staff, our mighty volunteers, and Eric, especially Eric Smith. Thank you so much.
No, my pleasure. Everyone, have a good weekend.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.